Hello everyone, I'm Samantha Jane Smith.
And I'm Jacob Keynes, and you are listening to the Classical Queer Podcast.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Classical Queer Podcast. I am Jacob Keynes, and this month I am here by myself. I'm not with Sammy, but I have some exciting things to chat about for you to listen to, and some great conversations with some actually very close friends. So this month's podcast is with my home ensemble, the Halifax Queer Ensemble, here in my home city of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And you're going to get an opportunity to listen to two conversations and a little bit of music that we make together. The first conversation is with Abby, who is one of our trumpet players in the group, and then also with Jessica, who is the co-conductor of the group, who leads the ensemble with me, who is a horn player, but also a conductor and a vocalist. And this is a bit of a different podcast for us. It's not a performance. It's not a polished concert or recording. It's a rehearsal, and actually, to be honest, quite a small rehearsal. We have had some bad weather in Nova Scotia, and there were only 5 or 6 of us at this rehearsal. Sometimes the ensemble is 20 people, sometimes the ensemble is 6, and tonight was just a small group, and we were actually sight reading through some new material after a couple weeks off. We came back and we're reading through Holst's The Planets for the very first time, and only with a few people. But it's a special podcast for me, and it's a special group for me. It's a ensemble that began in, I think, 2017, 2018, prior to me starting my doctoral research into queer performance, and actually basically at the beginning of what Classical Queer as a website is, but prior to the podcast starting at all. And we began with an orchestra in mind. The original iteration of this group was an orchestra, and so we had string players and a full wind section and some percussion, and we rehearsed weekly at a conservatory here in Nova Scotia, and did a couple concerts. And I've always had the mandate of highlighting queer performers, queer music where we possibly can. We have always had a mandate of being a safe community space in as neutral a space venue as we possibly can, and so we very consciously have chosen not to rehearse in churches or in spaces that queer people might find difficult to access. And so this iteration, post-COVID, or at least at this point in our COVID understanding of the world, we're rehearsing at my university that I work at. So Dalhousie University here in Nova Scotia has very graciously gifted us rehearsal space each week as a community building effort to allow the local queer community a space to come in and create music together. And so we restarted the Halifax Queer Ensemble really only 6 weeks ago, in the winter of 2023, beginning of 2024, and we have only had, I think, 5 or 6 rehearsals, and we are just beginning to rebuild, and it's really exciting. And this opportunity to work with these musicians is such a profound thing, and I think you can hear it in the chat that I have with Jessica, and I think you can hear it when I talk with Abby, one of our trumpet players, that this ensemble means so much to people because it is such a niche space, because it is such a unique opportunity to be with an exclusively queer group of people making music together. And it's as barrier free as possible, in that we are in an accessible space. We try to be in a space that has as few barriers emotionally, past wise, to get into. So again, not in a church. We keep the cost very, very low. We have a suggested donation of $10 a week to participate, which goes towards music costs and paying for physical materials and things. But we also have a really low barrier intentionally to musical access. So people can come from whatever background and musicality that they bring. We don't have a mandate of you have to play at a certain level. We don't exclude instruments even. We've had nights where we've had 3 accordions come join us with a bunch of clarinets and trumpets and percussion and piano. We've had people who read music, people who don't, and there's this really loving and caring spirit always where people who have more experience, or know their fingerings a lot better, or do read music really well, are very happy to just help everybody out. And we have a spirit of community where people can sit next to each other and learn from each other in all sorts of ways. And I tend to think of the ensemble much more as a social group that happens to play music together. And Jessica and I have really worked hard to build a ensemble that consciously goes against a lot of the hierarchies that ensembles usually have, where this idea of conductor as deity is not how we operate, where it's conversational, that I would much rather ask people what they want to play, or what they hear, or how they want to go through a rehearsal, or if they are feeling up to doing more or less, or if they want to contribute in any way that they see fit. And it's really important to me that I and Jessica as conductors are not necessarily the people running it. We're the ones in front waving our arms often, but that doesn't mean that the people in the ensemble don't have equal voice into how the ensemble is run, what we're doing, and how it moves forward. And we will continue to grow that, and we'll continue to explore what that actually means. And certainly people in the ensemble have lots of ideas about what that means for them. But it's really important to us as we build and grow the ensemble that it stays like that. It really functions like a community effort, and that we move through this experience together. And it's a wonderful and joyful queer space, and it challenges me a lot as a conductor, in that there's so many times when I walk into a rehearsal where I have expectations, or I have feelings about what a rehearsal should be, or a performance should be, or how we should approach something, and that gets dashed every time in the best possible way with the queer ensemble. It's a ensemble that sometimes is small, sometimes is large, sometimes we do a lot of playing, sometimes we end up doing a lot of talking, and it's really inspiring every time I get to go do it, which is every week, that sometimes it's late on a Tuesday, it's dark, it's still winter here, and it's hard to bring yourself back to the office to do this thing. And every single time I leave and I say, I got to do that this week. I got to work with these people and laugh and make music. And it feels really different than every other performance, every other rehearsal, every other ensemble that I work with. And I think that's a really good thing. It's this moment in my week, and I think for everybody, it's a moment in their week where you get to approach things with very little expectation. Just arrive and be yourself and play the thing that you're playing. And I hope you enjoy these chats with these people, these two lovely colleagues in the queer ensemble. And I hope you listen to the rehearsal snippet with the truest intent that it is, that it's just a little snapshot of how we work and how we make music with whoever is in front of you. And it always reminds me of a quote by the person I wrote my master's thesis on many years ago at this point, Frederick Fennell. And Fred always had this written at the top of his scores when he was working with a new group. You make music with the people who are in front of you, and it's important to remember that the people in front of you are the people who are making music with you. And I always try and remember that every week I get to walk in, and whoever is there is who I get to make music with. And so I hope you enjoy this little chat and snippet of rehearsal with the Halifax Queer Ensemble. And we'll be back to more regular kind of podcast content next month. But thank you for listening.
Tell us your name, what you do outside of Queer Ensemble.
Oh boy.
And then what you do in Queer Ensemble.
Okay.
We will start there.
Okay. I'm Abby, she, her pronouns. I am mostly a barista. I also work at a record store. And I do like odd music and acting things after around that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. And what do you play in the Queer Ensemble?
I play the trumpet.
You play the trumpet. And when did you start playing trumpet?
I started playing trumpet 14 years ago in high school.
It's always
Yeah, it's
back.
always high. 14 years ago.
Yeah.
That's
So
half of my life.
that's half of your life. So you've been playing trumpet for half of your life. You started in
Yeah.
high school. Did you grow up here?
No, I actually just moved here in September.
Right. We have talked about this.
Yes.
So where did you move from?
I moved from Guelph, Ontario.
Yeah.
hmm
You grew up there.
No, I grew up in the GTA, moved to Guelph for school.
Okay.
And then just stuck around because I loved it so much.
People love Guelph.
Yeah,
Like, they really
it's
do.
also like weirdly similar to Halifax.
Yes.
hmm
That is also what I've heard.
It's like Guelph is Halifax by a river, whereas
Yeah.
Halifax is Guelph by the ocean.
Yeah, that seems pretty
Yeah.
accurate, to be honest.
Mhm.
And so when you picked up trumpet,
Yes.
what made you pick trumpet?
There were too many saxophone players, so I took one for the team.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I wanted to be a saxophone player because I wanted to play jazz, but then there were too many saxophone players, and my music teacher was like, one of you has to play the trumpet, and I was like, I'll play the trumpet because I can still play jazz on the trumpet.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you played all through high school.
Yes.
And then did you continue afterwards?
I did, but kind of unintentionally.
Okay.
So I didn't go to school originally for music. I went for something else. Absolutely hated it. And then I was like, well, I might as well just do the thing that I love.
Yeah.
Didn't think that I was going to continue doing it. So I graduated with a music degree, took a little time off, and as soon as I was ready to kind of go back into it, the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heard that story a number of times.
Yeah.
Not to drag up a degree you didn't want to do, but what were you originally
I
there
was
for?
in international development originally. Yeah.
Interesting. It just wasn't the right fit.
Not the right fit at all. I was not developing anything internationally at all.
Fair. And so you went to Guelph.
Yes.
They have the music program,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And so I will sympathize and say after I finished my first music degree, I also needed time off.
It's a lot of burnout.
It's a lot of burnout. And I think people underestimate how much burnout it actually is.
Yeah.
Because I remember taking 3 to 4 years without playing clarinet. At all.
Mm-hmm.
I had gone into a master's, but it wasn't a performance master's, it was a musicology master's, right after, but it was nothing to do with playing the clarinet.
Yeah.
And I needed time.
Yeah.
Needed something entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
Similar feeling?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was like, well, I'll take the year. So I graduated university in 2019 after taking a whole extra year to finish up my degree. And then 2019, I was like, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a year, just hang out, don't think about music at all.
Yeah.
And then obviously that kind of extended itself because not a lot of music things were happening in 2020, obviously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always argue for taking break now. I mean, having done one, but also having talked to so many people who have taken breaks and come back to it the way they wanted to come back to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Such a different experience.
Absolutely.
And I think people underestimate when you're in a music degree how different it is playing as a music student than just playing in something because you are able to play in something.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I like to compare it to all through your university, you're consistently reading, and then you finish university and then you start to pick up things just because you want to read them, not because you have to read them.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it, because it's you playing because you want to play, not because you have to play.
Yeah.
Or you're getting graded. Or
you're
getting
100%. You're not doing it for a mark. You're not doing it for prof.
Yeah.
You're just doing it for you.
Because you want to play.
Yeah.
So how did you find the Queer Ensemble? Was it on Instagram?
A friend of mine, Neve, who is the percussionist for the ensemble, posted about it, and I was looking for opportunities to play some more. So
right.
It was kind of like, here you go, here's your community. It's actually really sweet because this happens on Tuesday nights, and back home in Guelph, our queer night happened on Tuesday nights too. So it was kind of like queer nights on Tuesdays.
Queer Tuesdays.
Yeah.
It's I mean, the listeners won't know anything about the ensemble. They haven't heard about it in the slightest.
Yeah. But
we have a consistent group of between 5 and sometimes 15 people.
Yeah.
And it's like a fun little ragtag group of queer musicians who meet on Tuesday nights.
Yeah, and it's such a like oddball group of like makeup of an ensemble too. Like some weeks you'll have a billion clarinet players and like an actual kind of brass section, and then this week we just had like a little tiny here and there kind of thing going on.
And then, I mean, from my perspective, it's the sole and only goal of doing it is to do it.
Yes.
And so if it happens at all, huge success.
Absolutely.
And my feeling is always, if there are 3 of us in the room, that's great. That's like the 3 of us are having a great time. Yeah. And it will always be important just to do.
100%.
But I say that as like the person who's like waving my arms in front. I am always curious like what people feel when they're in the ensemble. Like what are your thoughts on like
I think I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
I show up because it's just like it's kind of almost me time. Like I'm showing up for me by showing up for the ensemble.
Yeah. It's one of the other like guiding ethos of the ensemble is also that it's a like true community space, and that it's not a party space. It's like a friend building community queer space. It's really intentionally built as a not even really as an ensemble. Like it's because it's truly not. Yeah. It's not a consistent group of people. It's I don't want to say like drop in because that seems
it's not. There's
there's more to it. But
there's still consistency in it.
Yeah. But I'm curious about your experience with other like queer groups and communities and spaces, and what that has meant. Like, have you been part of a community that is similarly set up, as in it's like a social friend community queer space, and what that meant to you?
So like similar to like what I was talking about earlier with the queer nights in Guelph, it was very much just like a queer social thing. Like you can come in, hang out. But then I found that there was always like kind of a core consistent group of people that came in. And even if it wasn't consistent, anybody who was brand new, it was kind of just like, we're going to absorb you. You're our pal now.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I mean, we talk so much about like queer connection and community building on the podcast a lot because we talk with musicians about being queer as a musician and what that means in like non-queer spaces a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Rarely do we get to talk about what it means to be queer in a queer space and what that connection feels like. I have my thoughts. Like, what are yours on?
I don't know. For example, like today, I was kind of mulling over, like, oh, I can't wait to go to an ensemble today because I can be around similar people, just play music.
Yeah. It's, I mean, so much of the conversations we have with like musicians around the world is that they are the only queer nexus point in like a very hetero world, and they walk into these spaces and they're trying to like live their queerness and live and try and like find connections with
Yeah.
other queer people in a really straight space. And I always find it so refreshing to come to such a queer centered space, because it's not that I'm like a very my research is queer, my like practice is queer,
Mhm.
everything I do is queer, even in
Yeah.
straight spaces. But even that feels different when I am queer in a queer
Yes,
space.
100%. You're
Yeah.
just around people that
Yeah,
No.
there's I always to say it as like an immediacy.
yes, yeah, 100%. Mhm. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
So what else do you do artistically around town in your life and world?
So I moved to Halifax and I auditioned for a play, which and like I have no background in acting at all. So I landed the role in that. So I act outside of playing music, which is brand new to me.
Cool.
It's very fun to be exploring that. The last few plays that I've auditioned for have been very strictly queer. And again, there's a whole different dynamic when you're doing your art form with fellow queer people.
Yeah.
And then I'm playing in a jazz ensemble.
Great.
Yeah,
That's
so
fantastic.
it is very different than what we do here. It's a little bit more. There's one where. How do I explain it? It's a lot more challenging because all of these people are very very on it, and it's a good challenge though.
How big a group?
I want to say like 20 people.
Oh, so it's like a big band.
Yeah.
What
Jazz
big band is it?
The JMS Big Band.
I don't know. Oh, great.
Led by James Shaw.
Yeah, I know James.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And so, what's the demo of that group?
A lot. I think I am actually the youngest
Yeah.
musician in the group. Yeah, there's not a lot of young folks in that group. A lot
Yeah.
of like older folks and like middle-aged folks, which is really fun. I actually
Yeah.
love that kind of makeup of a band.
That's
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
And so you play like big band standards.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
A lot of like Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
We're working through some Thad Jones right
Oh,
now.
fantastic.
Really fun.
Yeah, that's super fun. And where do they rehearse?
The Christian United Church on Roby.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do know that one. Yeah, across from the Sobeys. Is that right?
No, it's beside the Irving gas.
Ah, yes, I do also know that
Yeah,
one.
right before
Yeah.
North. Or no, yeah, right before North if you're coming up from here.
Right. See, that was the other like hard thing about doing the queer ensemble is we didn't want to rehearse in a church.
Oh yeah,
There's
that is
so much baggage for people.
yeah,
very
100%.
obvious baggage.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find places.
It
Like
is
it's
very
hard to
hard.
find a spot that's like neutral
Yes.
but welcoming and
absolutely.
all of this.
100%. Yeah, I didn't even think about that kind of dimension to the actual place that we're rehearsing in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. We tried it once. I think we did one rehearsal in a church, and it felt so wrong. It felt really
Oh no.
weird.
Like,
And then we moved to a
yeah.
conservatory up in the North End.
Yes, on Chebucto.
On Chebucto, which was great.
Yeah.
But it also got shut down for the pandemic, and then we
Right.
just restarted
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
past year here at Dal, and we're lucky to have this space. But it's so funny how important the physical venue is to people.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
Mm.
that's a thing that queer people think about.
Mm.
It's not necessarily a thing that like anybody thinks about. It's just like you want to be able to create a welcoming environment for everybody.
Yep.
Churches kind of don't create that
Yeah.
environment sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Most like vast majority of the
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
Yeah. I worked for when I lived in Ontario, I was the music director for Unitarian Church,
Okay.
which is like the most queer, open,
Yes.
accepting,
Yeah.
like wonderful church. And even that is still a church.
Yes.
Like even that
There is
still,
still kind of a connotation of just like, we're gonna say everybody's welcome, but are they?
yeah. And even like I mean half the
Yeah.
congregation were like openly queer.
Yeah.
And even that was it's still there's like
There's
a room
still
with a
little,
like a piano on a stage
Yeah.
and a like thing, and it felt very much like a
Yes,
church still.
yeah.
But it makes it hard. what would you love from the queer ensemble? Like, what are your thoughts around what it could be?
I think that I would love to see it grow, obviously, in
Mhm.
like numbers of people who are coming in, because obviously the more the merrier. It would be really cool also to kind of like break it off into like little tinier branches. Like maybe we could do like a queer jazz ensemble at some
Yeah.
point. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like jazz and queerness is it's a thing, obviously, but it's
Mhm.
not an open thing. So that's a thing
Yeah.
that I would love, obviously, as a jazz musician. That's kind of the thing that I would love to explore.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll keep that in mind. I mean, as we grow, I mean, we have big thoughts for it, so
Absolutely.
it's always good to hear more input
Yeah.
from people, because we would also love to see it grow. We'd
Yeah.
love to see it like flourish into many different things. Thank you for chatting.
Yeah,
Thank you
of
for your
course.
thoughts.
This was fun.
Good.
Cool.
Let's start with names and what you do with the queer ensemble.
So my name is Jessica Amador, she, her, and I am a co-director alongside Jacob in the Halifax Queer Ensemble.
And outside of the queer ensemble, what do you get up to? What do you do?
I perform with a few different ensembles, playing horn and singing as well. Like there's the Galileo Baroque Choir that I joined last year. I traveled to PEI for some gigs with the orchestra and some choirs from time to time. Yeah, just kind of like performing with what groups I can around the city.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've worked together lots. I mean, as a horn player, what is you? I mean, it's such a stupid question, but why do you like playing the horn? As in, like, what music do you enjoy actually playing? Not what's like put in front of you, but like, what do you like playing as a horn player?
Yeah, that's kind of like the big question.
Mm.
And definitely one that I've been asking myself more as of late, in terms of like, oh yeah, I'm not just playing to play anymore. I want to play for something that's fulfilling, or that pays well.
Mm-hmm.
Or
both, and both can sometimes happen. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that what really drives me to play horn, with the groups that I am currently, at least, is being able to make like a meaningful like contribution as a musician, but also play music that is able to make a good connection with audiences, whether that's like just like the pure emotional connection of the music, or if there's like a good cause or something behind the concert, and like a certain message that's trying to be conveyed through it. Like, yeah, just I think those are the main things that come to mind anyway.
I mean, we both know so many like professional, like orchestral musicians, and there's so much. It's so easy to like just take the gig and play the thing, and certainly like everybody needs to make a paycheck. I get it, but there's something so much more profound about like wanting to play something, and like getting to play something that matters to you, rather than just playing the thing that's put in front of you. And so like I think about the Halifax Queer Ensemble that way, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on like conducting for the queer ensemble.
I think that so do you mean like specifically in terms of like the conducting role, or like just...
I mean the ensemble in general, like the existence of it, but also like what conducting for it like is for you. Like,
okay, yeah. I think that representation, like being able to be a representative for like for myself, being a person of color, and being a trans woman, like those I think are very specific niches that a lot of those people don't often get the opportunity to fill for whatever reason. So I think that that's really awesome, being able to do that and offer that kind of representation. But I think like the main motivation is really just like I really want this ensemble to succeed. I want it to do well because I think it's really important. The niche that this ensemble fills in the city, because like what you and I have talked about before is how classical music spaces are often not very welcoming and very intimidating, especially to people that might be coming back to it, or maybe they just want like something casual that they can have a community space out of, and to have a space where they can meet like-minded individuals and like see good representation, and have a good time, playing some hopefully fulfilling music as well. So
yeah, I mean the representation thing is so interesting because it's I realize that and in some ways that I know you do too. Like I walk in like almost like hyperqueer spaces, and like I recognize that I'm very lucky that I get to be around a lot of queer people a lot of the time, and that I see a lot of queer people working in classical music all the time because that's who I talk to primarily, but that's my research. But I think it's from my like cis white perspective is so like vastly under accounted for how little representation there is, like, and I'm sitting in this position and I'm saying that it's vastly undercounted, that like trans women of color conducting, I mean, name a couple, like literally name anybody, and it's so vitally important, like for you, but also because there are so many people who need to see that. Like there's so many people working in classical music, or not even in classical music in general, just like people who want to enjoy music, who want to see themselves on stage. And I recognize that like a lot of it is like an access thing. Like you say, there's, for whatever reason, so few trans women of color, specifically, maybe the many different subgroups working in classical music, not given the opportunities. And there are so many ways that we can create more opportunity that we just don't. And I mean, not to make you recount those, but like, what set of circumstances brought you to play? Like, how did you get into classical music, and what, you walk through university worlds, you walk through professional worlds. How has that happened for you? What's your path to that?
Honestly, I think I've been I think there's a kind of somewhat unique experience coming from a small town, city in quotation marks. But there's a certain unique experience that comes out of that, and especially if you're someone that is that has a drive or is like compelled to move forward, and if you have like a passion for what you're doing, then it I think it's kind of easy to, or not easy, but like there's more opportunity to kind of reach the big fish in a little pond stage, than there would be if I grew up in Toronto and tried doing what I am doing there. Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, super hard.
Yeah, but like yeah. So as far as like my experience coming into classical music, it was I don't know if standard is the right word, but it I went through the motions. Like I did. I really liked band class through junior high school and high school. I took all of the opportunities to play in like the different ensembles, like all of the jazz bands and all of the different like the pit bands for musicals and stuff like that. And yeah, that I think it was just kind of like a natural pathway to studying that in university. And there, especially at UPI where I studied, it was like it's a very intimate program. Like in my graduating class, I think there were 10 or 12 people in total. Yeah, the graduating classes are usually very small. So very quickly I was able to become like one of the horn players on the few horn players that's regularly available and like gigging on the island. And or like even in singing, like singing the tenor part, being able to sing a tenor part is very valued in a lot of choirs. So yeah, so all of that worked really well in Charlottetown, and then kind of coming to Halifax. I mean, there's definitely the struggle and the adjustment of coming to Halifax right when the pandemic really struck. So I feel like I've only really been able to explore more opportunities and make more connections more recently. But I think that even with many of the like performing ensembles that I'm with, a lot of that is due to connections that I might have had with people in Charlottetown, people across the water, or who might be gigging like between both cities. So yeah.
I think one of the reasons I wanted to hear your like coming to music story is, I mean, not that it provides like a template to other people, but like there is something about like the reason we have this importance on representation is because you want to see somebody like yourself do the thing that you want to do and succeed doing it. And it's really difficult for, I think, a lot of people who can't necessarily see that end goal of like what their dream looks like on stage or off stage or whatever their thing is. How do I get there? Like, what is that path that I can take to arrive as like a queer conductor on stage? And so I think part of the representation is seeing you do it, and then part of it also hear how you got there. Because I think there's so many people who would say, that's great, Jessica had that like, experience, and like off they went, and like she's doing this. But how can I do it? And so I think, it's a hard thing to tell people that they can do it without a model, right? And so, did you have models?
Yeah, no, that's the thing is I really didn't. Because like, especially in Charlottetown, like the music community is very small and tight knit. And like, if you're not already within certain circles, then it can be very hard to like break into those. But I think my training is departing. I think that really what helped me in terms of the greater challenge coming to Halifax, which was like the connections and networks and like getting to kind of break into different circles, was the initial stage of just kind of putting myself out there.
Mm.
Um, I think whenever whenever we originally met, I was at the my audition for the Dal Wind Ensemble, and that was a very spur of the moment thing. Like I hadn't found any groups to perform with in Halifax yet, and then like I think I was at Dal. I was looking into what like practice rooms look like, and like costs, and like what the facilities look like and everything. And I saw a poster. I saw a poster that there were auditions for the Dal ensembles. And like, yeah, it kind of went from there in terms of like getting to meet different musicians in the community and yourself. And I think that like that also kind of helped me dip my toes into things and kind of get an idea of or get a little bit of a lay of the land from that. And it's kind of like a nice little stepping stone to kind of expand those connections. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Because I also asked Abby, what would you? I mean, you and I have talked about it, but like for the sake of the listeners, like what would you love the Halifax Queer Ensemble to look like? What would your kind of dream goal for the HQE be?
I think really like the biggest thing that I'd like to see is just like having the ensemble grow and expand to a point where it can be a regular kind of community space and opportunity for queer folk to hang out and play music, to meet other queer folk that play music, and find people that have similar interests and be able to share in music making. I think that's a super important aspect to it, because again, like even if you're looking, I feel like even if you're looking at quote unquote amateur ensembles or community ensembles that they have fairly, let's say they have fairly low barriers to entry. Even with that can still be really intimidating, where there might be a lack of representation, either from the performing artists themselves or the leadership of these different ensembles, or even how they're run. I think that like all of that can definitely be intimidating for queer people of color, for example, trying that aren't necessarily experienced, or that are coming back to music after a long time off. Like I think that is even if it's not a literal barrier, I think it's a big factor, and probably a big factor in why we don't see more of that. More like queer classical musicians. Yeah.
I think my goals are the same. Yeah, I would like the ensemble to be a space where people feel like they can just arrive without any sort of necessity for anything else other than just bringing themselves into the room and make music. Like that would be the ideal, which I mean I think we're doing a fairly good job at. Like, I think we have a good group of people who feel that way about it. But I mean, not to like proselytize, but like I always just want more people to feel that thing. I want more people to feel that this is a space that they can bring whatever experience they have, whoever they are, and they will have a nice, warm, welcoming community to come play music with. And so I always just want more numbers, just because I think it's nice. I think it's just a good thing. Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for chatting with us.
Absolutely.
And listeners, I hope you hear Jessica's words and listen to more from Abby and hear more about the HQE. Okay, let's go right from the beginning, right from the top, and we'll go up to where we just ended at 41. And if we're feeling really good about it, we'll just continue at 42. E flat?
No.
A flat.
There's a really low.
Oh, where?
18.
Yeah. There is.
A flat's fine.
Yeah.
I think I can do it flat.
Okay, you got it. It's okay. Okay, from the top, and let's see if we can get all the way through Mars and Venus. Let's try it. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, very nice. I mean, considering we literally have played through this once or twice, you did very, very well. Also, I do like sometimes when arrangers recognize that you did that thing in the first bit and then they give you some rest so that you can actually breathe for a second. I want to try 52 and see how they have it marked with like 2-note slurs. So we want that kind of B thing. I suppose that's only in Sorry, take that back. That's only in part 2. You can do that. And then everyone else is just kind of plotting with their quarters. But let's hear it at 52. Actually, let's do 51 so we get your entrance. 51. 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah. Are they in part 1? Is it written in octaves or is it just one part? Octave it up. Go nuts with it. Because in the score it's written as like 3 octaves. So like, that sounds much better. I like that feeling of kind of like undulating, pulsing, whatever. Can we do it again at 52? And so octaves and then also just a little more. 52. 51, sorry, because I want to get your end. 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah, that sounds beautiful. It's so nice. I mean, this is, I spend a lot of my time not hating on the classic. If you talk to like the DAL students, they would say Jacob never wants to play anything that's been played before. But and part of that is true. But then also sometimes you play it and it's really lovely. It's very nice. I get it. I'll concede a little bit that this is lovely. Great. How do you feel lip-wise? Medium? Can we do a full run from there to, like from the beginning to where we just stopped? And then we'll take a tiny break and reset and we'll do some Mamma Mia?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah, maybe do a little first. Okay, from the top. Da-da-da-dun, dun, da-da-da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, fantastic, really good. And then it jumps into Jupiter, which is
So that's all for this episode. You've been listening to the Classical Queer Podcast, and Jake and I look forward to being with you next month. The incidental music was courtesy of Jared Miller, and the show was produced by Samantha Jane.